This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, hello everybody. How are you all doing? We're back at the Cube Corner show, and today we have a fantastic guest. We actually have someone from Caston, okay? And not just someone, but the Caston community manager. So this is right in our kind of neck of the woods, community, whatnot. And so today I'm here with Cassandra Ferris, who runs the community management at Caston, and we're going to talk a lot of interesting things. First and foremost, obviously, I'm going to allow her to introduce herself, and then we're going to talk about her background, IT, and some really interesting stories that she's got. And then we're going to go over the 10 things that you didn't know about KubeCampus, and possibly more. Okay, we just said 10 because we didn't want to put too many and get your expectations too high, but we're going to talk about Kubernetes learning and communities and everything like that. So without further ado, here is Cassandra Ferris. And also a little disclaimer, Cassandra was fine. I was really sick for 5 days, so I might not be my normal jovial self and whatnot, although I'm trying. Okay, go ahead, Cassandra.
All right. So yeah, thanks, Geoff. Like he said, I am the community manager at Caston by Veeam. I joined the organization about 4 months ago now. So back in December. And my first big initiative was actually around KubeCon and scheduling a Kubernetes learning day at KubeCon, where we worked through some of the KubeCampus labs hands-on in person. We'll chat a little bit more about that. The big thing about me is that I say that I'm focused on the human side of technology. So kind of my origin story in tech is that I started as a technical recruiter for a software consulting company. And that company, as part of their business model, sponsored a lot of community events. We actually provided space for user groups and meetups and things. And I was the person who was coordinating the user group logistics. And then I was approached to run a cross-platform cloud computing conference, and then another conference that evolved to be Microsoft and open source. Eventually decided I was going to start speaking on topics myself, basically taking all of that knowledge and all of those questions and all those things I learned from thousands of developer interviews over the year and understanding what people wanted to know. And throughout all of that journey, as I started speaking and being more involved in community, I realized that my passion was actually about the people who were using the technology and the communities around them, and not so much about hiring people. So I was at a conference with some friends talking about kind of next steps in my career, and one said, "Have you considered community management?" And I said, "That's a real job." So that's what I do now. I used to manage a community of open source contributors for a DevOps and SecOps product. I worked for a mortgage company. I also contracted at Microsoft before coming here. As far as Kubernetes goes, I've been around the DevOps world for a while, but with Kubernetes, I am a rookie. So part of what I'm doing is sharing my learning journey as a rookie. Now, at Caston, basically a community manager, we're this hybrid, partially marketing, partially teaching, very much a liaison. So here I have 3 main communities that I manage. One is around KubeCampus, which is what we're going to chat about today. One is our open source products and contributors, and the third is Kubernetes Corner and the Veeam community site. So those are my 3 communities. I'm here basically to understand what our communities need and try to put those things in place. When I'm not doing tech, I'm very much into soccer and board games and travel and my chaotic corgi dogs. So that's me.
Yeah, and I really like what you said about recruiting and communities, because to a lot of maybe purely technical people, they think, well, recruiting, profession, community, it's kind of the same thing, but it's not, because recruiters are always so nice to you before you've actually gone for the job. It's like, oh, Geoff, you're so wonderful, and then they kind of disappear once. Whereas community is an ongoing thing, so it's something you have to, as you said, manage. You have to maintain it. So it's very interesting, because that is a totally different job and mindset. So that's interesting.
Yeah. And the thing that got me into it is, at the time, cloud computing and Agile were the new hotness. And I was thinking, if I'm going to be recruiting for these things, I need to understand what they are. And so I started going to user groups and got bit by this bug.
Well, that's interesting. So
yeah.
you actually defected to the other side. You thought you were going to go in there and learn about them to be able to use recruiting, but then you joined the other. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
What I wanted to ask you about also was, during your career, you've had ups and downs, things like that. And I just want to know, like, I think you told me that you'd actually been involved in layoffs, because recently there have been so many layoffs in tech, and this is a real uh, difficult, and especially I think for younger people, like people that say just come out of college, they got that great job, they went out saying I'm working for Google, wonderful, and then 2 years, and then the end of the world happens, and that's it, and it's never going to be again. So what would you advise people who are in that state now from your experience?
Oh goodness, I'm actually giving a whole talk that talks about this topic here in a couple weeks.
Oops.
It's no, it's fine. It's called Failing Successfully, and it's about how to get through hard times. I have been laid off several times due to mostly mergers and acquisitions, and then like projects just being scrapped, budgets being cut throughout the pandemic. But the biggest piece of advice I can give people isn't something you should do when you're laid off, but before you're laid off. You need a community, you need to build a network, you need to get to know people around you. This job at Caston is the first job I've gotten in a long time where I actually applied through LinkedIn. Normally, I find jobs through, people DM me on Twitter about them, people contact me. So just having that professional network. And so when I put it out there that I was looking, there were a whole bunch of people that contacted me. So find your community, get involved with it, try to help other people within the community. I think that's part of it too, is that I've coached many people, I've hired many people, I've, given people all sorts of little pieces of advice. And as a result, when it comes time for them to help me, they do. And that's how our community works.
Yeah, I mean, that's excellent. I couldn't have thought of that. Why didn't think of that? Prepare for a layoff before it happens. I mean, that is brilliant, because in fact, if you do have a community and you've got something you can fall back on, you're ready for it. And the LinkedIn thing too is interesting, and also why it's important in communities, because for instance, my last couple of jobs, I haven't provided references. I think they looked at the show, a lot of them said, oh, well, we're not hiring him, that's it. But some were silly enough to do so. No, I'm joking, but you're right. You can really leverage this community and modern situation with LinkedIn and whatnot. So that's really good advice. Okay, so apart from that, I think we've gone over the kind of the introduction. Do you want to start now talking about KubeCampus, and explain, if you can, your role with KubeCampus, like, because you're the community manager. So does this fall completely under you, or are you just helping to promote it?
I'm more helping to promote it, to help get the content, to help kind of tie some threads together between KubeCampus and Caston and Veeam. That's what I do. I don't create the content. What I am doing is, as I'm out and about and I get feedback and we start to see that there is content or topics people might want to cover, if we start seeing enough demand for that, we can always create labs around that stuff. But so yeah, KubeCampus is just a part of what I manage. The community itself has 20,000 people. So my role is more managing, are people taking the labs? Are there other things that people need in addition? Sharing other resources with people. Starting in the next month or so, I want to start doing like office hours and have time so people can come and meet with me, or we can work through labs together. I'm fine with doing that sort of stuff too. It's just what everybody needs. But a lot of the next couple months, a lot of it is very much focused on conferences and events. So.
Okay, yeah, and that's a big number. I mean, that's 20,000 plus, especially when we take in consideration, this is not a distribution, a Kubernetes distribution. This is a backup and disaster recovery organization, which are giving Kubernetes labs, and they're being accepted by the community, which I think is important to underline.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And for me personally, the reason I'm learning Kubernetes is because I'm managing a community now of, Kubernetes products. And so I'm learning it myself, and it's kind of fun to just share that journey with people.
Yeah. All righty, so let's continue on through the About KubeCampus, I guess. So I think by now, anyone who's followed the Cube Corner have heard of, well, they've heard of the Caston Learning site. Maybe you can talk about that, because it was the Caston Learning site, and then it had a rebranding.
Yep,
people might know that.
Yeah.
But what would have changed with the KubeCampus? Is just a name change, or is there some thought to something more?
So it was more than just the name change. We launched KubeCampus in October at KubeCon North America. But it was more than just the name change. We launched KubeCampus because there just wasn't enough there wasn't enough training available. And that was one of the big pieces of feedback that we heard, was that people wanted more training opportunities. So KubeCampus is a whole platform. It's kubecampus.io. And how it works basically is you log in, you make a profile. We can talk about all that in a little bit more detail. But yeah, to start, that was the interesting thing, was the CNCF took a survey and found that lack of training was one of the main reasons that people weren't deploying containers and why people weren't using Kubernetes. And so because of that, that's kind of what the impetus was for building KubeCampus.
Yeah, and it's important to note too that this is a unique opportunity, because so many other technologies, to be trained in them, you have to pay huge amounts of money, or your company does if they're willing to. And so when you think about it, no matter how it might seem complex, Kubernetes, it's free training. I mean, you can't go wrong. And
Yep.
so I just wanted to underline that, because I've recently been enrolled in a traditional course for it's like I looked at the price. I didn't pay, but I looked at the price. It was after all this KubeCampus, it's a little bit difficult. So it's totally free. That's another thing we have to underline here. You don't have to pay anything.
Yep. And I had a lot of conversations with people about this at KubeCon a couple of weeks ago, but it's a good jumping off point. It's a good starting point to run through the labs. We have them basically what happens is when you make your KubeCampus profile, it gives you an assessment of your Kubernetes knowledge. And then the website spits out, oh, these are the places that you should start. These are the labs you should take first. And then you can walk through all the labs and get badges and everything. You can repeat labs multiple times, which I myself have done, especially as I've been teaching some of these. Labs are all about an hour and all a very similar structure, where you'll have a pre-reading material with a blog, then there's a training video, and then there's a hands-on lab, which is a little bit of quiz questions, and then we actually spin up a VM on your machine and you get into the code and deploy or add security or whatever it is that lab's about.
Yeah, and I'll also mention from my point of view, because I've done a lot of them, it's very digestible. I can't think of a better word. For someone who's basically a little bit lazy like me, I don't like courses when you're in there and it's like, and I'm falling asleep. It's quick, fun, fast. Well, I would say fast paced. You can control the pace, but it's pleasant. I guess pleasant's the word. It's not something that's going to put you to sleep.
Yeah. It's for me, who has a very short attention span. It's great that it's in an hour, and then. So what I do is I usually will, for me to be able to learn it, I'll block off time every week for me to run through one or two of the labs. Just that's a piece of it, is setting aside the time for it.
Yeah, and I like the fact that they're the badges too, because then you've got some kind of accomplishment, and also you can show your boss too. I mean, normally these badges again cost money, and so that's always fun.
Yeah, I'm having fun with the badges. We'll chat about that in a little minute. And then as far as topics go, so this is just a screenshot of some of the different courses that KubeCampus could recommend for you to take. So you can see everything from like just starting building your first Kubernetes cluster, that's the one that I teach, to, application consistency storage. As you get further along, the topics get more niche as well when it comes to observability, security. And now we're talking about some new content coming up that we might wind up building with some partners. So.
And you can see there are some pretty big names. I mean, there's Michael Cade, who is in the top 50 of the cloud world people, Michel Chaussy, who's one of the top Cassandra engineers, and Thomas Keenan, who I believe he's like the project manager of KubeCampus.
Yes, Thomas and I work very closely together. He and I, work on these learning days that we're doing and everything else. And yeah, he's been my onboarding buddy, and he's been amazing for that as well. Just, we learn a lot from each other.
Again, I just want to underline that this is covering all aspects of Kubernetes, not just backup and replication. So it's important to remember that, because I had someone actually mention to me a few months ago, well, I'm not going to KubeCampus. I mean, backups, yeah, I'll get to it eventually. No, this is everything. It's not just backup.
Yeah. Something too that's important to note, I was again talking with people last week at the conference about different training resources that are available. And several people told me that some of the other Kubernetes training platforms aren't updated anymore. And we keep ours up to date. We just released a new lab, I think a month ago, but we release several new labs a year and make sure to update the old ones as everything changes. And And then we supplement the labs with some other resources and knowledge as well.
Yeah, and it's great too, because like I got really busy and I didn't look for a while. Now there's one on CRDs, customer resource definitions, and but you're right, because especially if you go to places like we'll name the website, I'll get sued.
Same.
You go to this place, but I got caught once. I bought some courses on a certain site, and then I didn't look. Last updated in little small print, it was like 2019. This is like pre-COVID. Like So in the Kubernetes world, it's a very dynamic world right now. Well, I think it's always going to be. So you need something that's kind of ongoing. So that's a very important point that you made.
Yeah. Okay, here's the badges. Well,
Oh yeah, this one.
So gamification, I know that some people just love it. And KubeCampus does have a leaderboard. We have these digital badges that we get you. Eventually, I'd like to tie them into other, maybe like swag that you can get in person. That's somewhere in the pipeline. The thing I'm having a lot of fun with the badges is right now at conferences, a few of them we're doing what we're calling a Kubernetes Learning Day. And it's about a 5-hour day split up. The first half is a rookie lab. The second half is a pro lab or a more advanced lab. And we work through these labs on site with people who are attending the conferences. So we had 130 or so people at the one at KubeCon. The one at Detroit, they always have, they sell out, they have waiting lists. My next couple will be at Cube Huddle, and we are Developers World Conference. But then in addition to the badges, when you participate in the learning days, you also get a pin, a rookie or a pro Kubernetes pin, and specialized badges. So we launched the first one of those at KubeCon in Amsterdam, and it was one of these badges, but it had a little windmill on it, and it said Learning Day AMS for Amsterdam. And so now we're working on building a series of like specialized badges. And then, like I said, eventually, once I get virtual learning days, we'll have virtual learning day badges as well that people can receive. You can display them on your social media, put them on your profile, bragging rights to your boss, whatever it is that works for you. I know that seems to be one of your things, right?
Well, of course, but also swag. Actually, I've got to hold you back. The swag is number one. I didn't get a pin. I'm gonna have to ask for that. But
I will get you a pin.
Yeah, pin, a pro, please. I mean, if I get rookie, it might be a little disappointing. But what I really like about these badges is they look as if, I don't know if it's true or a professional designer has done them. I mean, they're very nicely high quality. And people especially think the IT world, well, who cares about looks of badges stuff? It makes a difference. I mean, I did a course on something. I got this little badge on Credly, and it was just ugly. It was ugly. It was not a pleasant badge. I don't know what it was. So anyone who sees that, first impressions, they're not even gonna read the title. Whereas these things, I mean, I like the course one. You've got a little graduation hat. So I think that's important too. People like. It's not only of course you're going for the education first and foremost, but when you get a nice little, it's like a cake at the end of your supper, nice, pleasant, the way it looks, So I think that they put a lot of effort into these, and it's good.
Yeah, our design team is phenomenal, and I love working with them. But yeah, there was a lot of back and forth as we designed the different badges and put together templates, and it is with a professional design team that does these, and there will be several iterations, and we want to make sure everything's just right for whatever it is we're trying to convey.
Yeah, I mean, just an idea, you might want to push out some T-shirts with these, and hats. I mean, not that anyone would be very interested, but certainly be nice if you get to the end of it, you can walk around as a, K8S monitor or something. But that's just an idea.
Yeah, it'd be cool even if they were like stickers or badges. And this is the type of stuff that a community manager, like, obviously can't do everything everybody wants, but that's actually the type of thing that as a community manager, that's the type of thing to tell me. Because when I start hearing enough of that, then I go to other people and say, hey, we should build KubeCampus t-shirts or whatever.
Yeah, it's funny because in the community, things like that are important. I mean, when I started putting stickers on my laptop, it was like tattoos, But of course, removing it was like tattoos too. I didn't realize when I switched jobs, and I better take these off. And I was like, oh my goodness, it was absolute. There's a whole technique. So, but it's important. I think people, you're doing your job, you're learning the technology. We're human beings. We're not computers. We like to have a little bit of flavor. We like to have it. Life's boring otherwise. A nice little sticker or some swag, of course, but it is important. And it's funny because sometimes you think, well, yeah, it's obvious, but there are organizations that make this mistake. They ignore things like that, and they wonder why it's not as successful as it should be. So that's, again, something a community manager, as you pointed out, is an expert at this, and it is almost a science. You have to do it right? So
Yeah, it's a little science, a little art. Community management's it's an interesting role, and it looks different everywhere you go. Trying to think what else. Oh, kind of back to the learning days that we were talking about. So this photo is from our learning day in Amsterdam. You can see the room is just full of people. Everybody working on the labs, and just it worked out really, really well for us to have this event in person. And then we had people, afterwards, of course, talking to us, asking questions, and taking further labs, because you can do the labs on your own as well. And then the rest of the week, I wound up actually demoing KubeCampus a little bit during the conference, during the KubeCon conference.
So during these events, what you're basically doing is everyone was doing the same lab at the same time. So it was like right. And so they got the badge well after that. That's interesting. Okay. And then they can go back to
Yep.
and show people. That's a great idea. Yeah. Because I was at KubeCon 2021, but what was announced then, that wasn't present then. But certainly, well, of course, back then they wouldn't have had something like this because the requirements are very strict because of COVID. So that's good. But that's interesting that you can do a live training session.
Yeah, and we had because we relies obviously on Wi-Fi, but we knew that could be an issue, so we actually had things, and we had like several backups in place. So even if the Wi-Fi acted up, when the Wi-Fi acted up, we were able to go to a different version of the platform and just do the labs anyway. Like I said, during the learning day, we're a backup company, and so if we don't have backups for our lab, then that looks pretty darn bad.
Yeah, and I done DMCE training, and I remember one year we did it in Las Vegas, and we were relying on the Wi-Fi, and we were at the lab stage, and something just didn't happen, and it was, so that's a good point about doing stuff like that live. It's like a demo, when you're presenting, and before you present, if you've got your superstitions, you touch your head 3 times or whatever, please make everything work. But on the other side of the coin, you can always show them the link and then go back and actually do it later. So that's important as well. Have you had any other organizations ask you about this, just out of interest? Who maybe are not competitors, obviously, but has there been interest about this? Or
Yeah, so the thing that I hadn't necessarily anticipated, that was one of the most common questions I got, was, do we do this sort of training, privately or more in depth for other companies? I was asked that a fair bit. And then a lot of people actually just thanked us for this resource. But that is something that we are talking about. Again, very, very early stages. There's a lot that's just right at the beginning, but we are talking about there could be potential to do trainings and other things down the line, as well as these free learning days. So things that
you're successful and people want more of it. But I'll tell you, it's always interesting. I remember when Veeam set up Cloud Connect, and it was great, the networking. So, hey, you can do networking, and they thought about it. Well, we're not a networking company, so we'll see. But it's the fact that people think it's such good quality that they're willing to actually. I'm assuming they're willing to pay for it. What you're talking about, right? Private lessons.
Wow. I'm thinking, like I said, it's real early, but it's definitely something that we've been approached for. So we'll see where those conversations go. They're very early, but believe me, if we start offering that, I'll be back talking about it and telling you what all we can do.
We'll have a whole separate show.
Stories and all that. Yeah.
50% off if you show up to the Cube Corner show. There we go.
Exactly. All right, let's see what else. In addition, of course, to the labs, we have a lot of other resources on the KubeCampus website. These Guerrilla guides are books that are kind of more in depth about different topics. You can download those for free. Again, it's, you put in your email, and they're usually like 20 to 30 page ebooks. And then we also have these text layer chronicles. We have a couple like comic books, and those are kind of a more fun take on why you need to care about storage and why you need to care about backup. And those are a very popular giveaway at our conference booths, but those are both also resources that are on there. We also have some white papers, some case studies, some other YouTube videos and things that you can check out, as well as all of our community resources.
Yeah, it's funny, the comic book thing. There's some things that like 15 years ago in tech, I never expected to see. because I don't remember seeing, and then these comic books started showing up, and I thought, well, now how is someone going to be sitting at their desk in their office reading a comic book, in the olden days? Whereas now you say, oh no, sir, or ma'am, I've got, it's a Gorilla Guide to Kubernetes Backup. Of course, inside you might have the real comic book, the spider, or Batwoman or something, but it's funny how, on the other hand, I actually spoke to an education professional, and they said sometimes, again, the presentation layer is so important in the ability for the mind to actually ingest this information better. So, I mean, if you, like, for instance, it's tax time in Canada, and I hate doing my taxes. And if someone made a really fun comic book like Kubernetes, how to do your taxes, oh, right, maybe I'd be waiting, so a lot is important in that sense. And also, I don't know, do you actually have, at the conferences, do you give out real copies of these? Okay.
Of the comic books, yes, definitely. We had a bunch of them. That's funny because I'm thinking back to years ago, when I was at the consulting company that got me into community. We did a series of like trainings basically where we learned about each department. And when we learned about the accounting department, they gave us this book that was like cartoony. And it was all like, if you ever, it was like a duck is running a lemonade stand, and then all of the examples of how the accounting worked was around this duck running a lemonade stand. And it didn't make accounting any more fun, but it at least made the learning and entertaining.
Yeah, definitely. No, and I also like the fact, because when I was at KubeCon LA, I can't remember which company they actually little book. It was a comic book. Actually, I can name it, it's not a problem. I think it was HA Proxy, and have these. And on the plane back, on a plane, sometimes you want to pull a screen out or something, and just a little book, old school. It was actually quite fun. I got through all of them. They were about, you're right, 20, 30 pages. Yeah. So that is definitely an option as well.
Yeah, yes, some entertainment for the ride home. So yeah, those are some of the resources, but we have a ton more resources for not just KubeCampus specifically, but for all things Kasten and Veeam. The Slack channel is kubecampus.slack.com. You don't have to necessarily even be taking the labs, but it's a place that you can join. And there are channels for people who are getting started, channels for people going to events, all that sort of stuff. Right now, social media-wise, we're on Instagram and Twitter, both at KubeCampus. I think we'll probably have some other platforms rolling out, but that's where we are at this moment. And then, of course, within like the Veeam community site, I have my other communities, so our K10 support group and Kubernetes Corner. And then, yeah, scheduling a meeting with me, again, is also something that we can do. If you go on the KubeCampus website, there's a link to my Calendly, and I don't have any time available the next couple weeks because I'm traveling, but then after that, I'll keep it up to date with my calendar. So
unless someone wants to go to Greece, right? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be at DevOps Greece or DevOps UK, let me know. I'll be there.
Now that's good. That's, by the way, a totally new thing, the scheduling a meeting with the community manager.
So yeah, that's definitely
new. One thing you might want to explain a bit more, just keeping in mind that there might be a lot of pure Veeam people watching this who don't know about the whole Slack thing. Because Slack communities in the Kubernetes world are quite different from the hub. I find them intimidating sometimes, because you'll open Slack for, I won't name, but there's a billion of these channels, and I'm thinking this will be a full-time job just keeping up with this, whereas the community hub's better. But so how would you deal with Slack? And I think the KubeCampus one is actually pretty lean and mean. I don't think they bloated it enormously.
No, it's not a very noisy one. I'm in, I don't know, 30 or so Slacks. There's so many of them. With social media in general, actually now gets into social media strategy, but at some point you just need to understand that you're not going to be able to read every single post that's everywhere. So like Slacks that I really keep an eye on, obviously the Kasten and KubeCampus ones. And then there's a couple community Slacks that I stay very involved in that are for other people who do what I do. And then a couple like call for speakers Slacks, but I usually will pop into those ones, or the KubeCampus and Kasten I monitor daily. The other ones I pop into, I don't know, once or twice a week to see what's happening and share advice.
Yeah, and I mean, Slack is similar. Some communities, depends on the community, some it's just purely support. So you go in there, you ask a question, you get an answer. Some it is actually like a community hub. I personally, I guess because of my background, I prefer our community hub and Kubernetes Corner because it's easier, it's web-based, and it's just, you can see the topics, easier to organize. But that's an important thing as well. And by the way, the K10 support, I want to underline this as well. is fantastic. It's free. So I was doing some on the weekend and I couldn't figure it out on the weekend, believe it or not. And it's free. And I have to ask questions like, well, I'll wait till Monday or Tuesday. But they answered. So I was really impressed. And they told me what to do. So that was great.
Yep, and
And
we do monitor those that regularly and respond and be active in them.
yeah. Okay, then at Cube. Oh, so at KubeCampus is the Instagram and Twitter, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then the Veeam community site, I didn't put their, I didn't put a link, but I will put a link to that page.
Yeah, I mean, if you
I'll just drop it
Google
in the chat.
Veeam Community Hub, it pops up.
Yeah, yeah. It's not.
Gotta be careful. I Google Hub once and I got this tire company, you know, for what are they? Yeah, for cars and stuff. So just make sure you put Veeam in there.
Nice. And I'm just dropping both these links in the chat real quick.
Yeah, I'm checking the chat as well. And okay, that's great. Let's see if there's any questions.
Oh my God, struggling
Oh my
with
God.
6 Flags. Yeah,
Yeah,
you just have to.
Yeah, I can't. Oh, it's Luis. I've seen him because he's the Tanzu Vanguard too. Yeah, and that's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't chatted about the Vanguards yet, but we will here in a couple minutes. That's another thing that I want people to know about. So, so community connections, getting involved. This is going to lead right into the Vanguard. So, in addition to taking KubeCampus classes, there are also chances for you to be involved with KubeCampus in the other way. So, we're always looking for people to write blog posts. We're always looking for people to help instruct. And honestly, just influencing and talking about KubeCampus and about Kasten and about Veeam and about our products is a huge way to help and get involved too. But yeah, blogging, instructing, we actually, one of our main instructors now a year ago was a learner. He was at the event in October. He approached Thomas Keenan about becoming an instructor, and now he's one of our instructors for KubeCampus. So it's just a matter of something you're interested in doing, reach out. And then yeah, we also have partners. This is a newer thing too. We've had 2 partners sign on so far, Scality and Stormforge. What our partners do is they also can create content for us. They can sponsor and support us. There's actually a sponsor prospectus if we're looking for financial support, but right now a lot of it is focused on just increasing the amount of content and getting it a little bit more specialized. So I'm talking with a third company that may become a partner and help us do some work around CI/CD and Kubernetes and building some labs around that.
Yeah, because I saw that announcement and at first I didn't understand it. So it's partners. I didn't understand the role. So you just answered that question, which is very good.
Yeah. They're collaborators or they are financial supporters or both. And then other community resources. I think we covered. Oh, this is the other stuff I want to talk about. We chatted about it a little bit. But yeah, in addition to KubeCampus, like I said, there are these other communities that are open source. We have our Canister and our Kubester open source products, and then the Kubernetes Corner and Kasten K10 support, which I think you've been around those a lot longer than I have, Geoff. Do you have anything you want to share about them?
Yeah, I mean, so my approach to learning Kubernetes, and by the way, you said you're a rookie. I don't know if there isn't anyone who isn't a rookie or doesn't feel like a rookie. Let's put it that way. But Kubernetes it's a huge in a way that really leveraging multiple resources, I think, is the key to success. And so, you know, some people might say, well, you know, this sounds great, but, you know, I'm already registered this, that, and the other, and I don't have time for KubeCampus and whatever. I would say if you really want to get into DevOps and get into this technology, you should make the time. It doesn't take a lot of time. There's no pressure. So there's no, again, I don't want to name any of their companies, but, you know, you buy the $50,000 course, you've got 20 days to complete it, and then it disappears. Like, what? You know, none of that. So, you know, there's no pressure. And what you might find by, at least what I found, was by putting your toe in different ponds, you suddenly find the ones that actually produce better results. And the KubeCampus, a lot of effort's been put into it, and it's keeping up to date. And because I've tried to do as many training sites as possible because of permanent imposter syndrome, I can compare. And these are very good. I'm not just saying that because they bought me the swag, which I'm not even wearing today. So, but they are very good. And it's not that others are bad. I think the thing to underline here is that these are especially good for people who maybe have been in IT but not Kubernetes, okay? Because you'll see, I don't want to say any course is bad, but there are courses which like assume you were a developer, right? So you've been coding in C++ for years, and now you're going to Kubernetes. And I've seen those type of courses. And for me, they were harder to deal with because, attention span and like what you said, they just weren't the thing. Whereas these were the right amount of time, the right amount of focus that I could handle it. So again, that's one of the things I'd point out. As far as the open source projects, that's going, of course, deeper a bit. Kubester, you can test your storage beforehand, and Canister is a whole world of, especially, which I'm going to talk about at KubeHuddle because I'll be there as well, application-aware backups, okay, which is very important. So, but this is all touched upon in the KubeCampus. So basically, if you don't know anything about Kubernetes, let's say you're a vSphere administrator or a Hyper-V administrator, and you don't know anything about Kubernetes, and people keep bugging you, that's the future, 5 years you won't have a job, which of course is exaggeration. This is a perfect place to start. And really, you can get a badge. So there you go. So that's kind of my attitude about it. I think that it's very, very good they've added you to the program because, a community person who's going to hover above all this and then point in the right direction and add that aspect, especially as it scales. And it is, as you're saying. So, yeah.
And ultimately, that's my main thing, is to be a liaison between all these communities, between Cast and between Veeam, and try to find, I don't know, I've found in my whole career, like a lot of times people want to pit like business against development or something like that. And the key is you have to understand you're all focusing on the same goal. And once you find the shared goals among all these different groups, you can get them working together and being successful. But that's, the community manager finds the shared goals and the shared requests and that sort of stuff.
Actually, that brings one question I almost forgot to ask. And we've had a lot of community people on the show. And one question I always ask to hear the interesting answer: how do you deal with other open source communities and other open source community managers? Do you interact with them? It's because one thing to point out is the open source world is different from the pure business world, IT, for instance. So but it's because just like DevOps, developers and operations, which when I started my career, I thought would never mix. I mean, I walked in a room with developers and they're all sitting there for 5 hours and they never put their head up. And I thought, wow, I can't focus for 2 minutes on a screen. And it's kind of similar to the open source business community. And now you're kind of right on top of both worlds. So how do you how do you interact with other community managers from other, let's say, open source communities? And how do you manage this? You're kind of part of a business, but you're open source, that kind of thing.
Oh, that's interesting because there's actually a conversation happening on, so community management is part of developer relations, or DevRel for short. And there's a conversation on DevRel Twitter right now about the amount of collaboration and how important it is for people in our profession to be more collaborative than to be kind of at each other's throats, because it brings up the whole group, and more practically because you don't know where you're going to be working in 3 years, so you don't want to burn bridges. But I actually so there is a Slack and just a whole group called DevRel Collective. There's actually a DevRel conference, a couple of them. And then I actually have just a smaller group of several close friends who are all in developer advocacy, community management, and that's the place where we all go when we need help with an abstract or we want to discuss metrics or any of that kind of stuff. So because our jobs are so odd, I think that these communities, which happen to mostly live in Slack, seem to be really important for us. And then we can share advice and share what several of my friends are also in DevOps world in different ways. And so we're sharing, comparing notes on what's happening at this conference and talking about, these are the trends that we're seeing. And then, of course, we have fun, and it's, we support each other as people as well as talk about work stuff, which big believer in that. So
as far as the business side, because I've heard different things, so one thing I have some friends who are very open source, there should be no business involved. And then there are people I think are more realistic that say, well, it has to work together. But one of their always accusations is, well, no, the business group will always start, heavy hand and try to, manipulate. I personally, from my little level, have never noticed that. But I mean, what are your ideas on that? Because you've actually worked with Microsoft, right? Which back in the day, in the 90s, I remember it was there was a Linux and Microsoft, and this was World War V. So you've been, in the heart of the enemy, so to speak, open source. But it's actually not that way, right? I mean, at all.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so that goes back to my first, actually first time I met anybody from Veeam. I used to run a conference called Dog Food Con. So Microsoft uses the term dog fooding. Eating your own dog food means, using your own products. So we started, I didn't start, but they started Dog Food Con here in Columbus, and it would meet at our Microsoft office, which shares office space with Veeam. And Rick Vanover from Veeam was my main sponsor contact for
Small
Dog Food
world.
Con. And so then 8 years later, here I am, and we worked together. But what was really interesting about that conference is it was exactly that. The first 2 years, it was like, oh, we won't touch anything Linux. And then 1 year, I got to have Red Hat out to talk about hosting their Linux machines on Azure. And the conference evolved to open source, and that was a really fun, and it was a fun journey because originally that conference, the tracks were literally SQL and I don't know, .NET and whatever. And so then there was actually like an Xbox and mobile track and stuff, all these things. And now it's it had become then just more general, like your DevOps, your development, your quality, your testing. It had about 8 or 9 different tracks, and we were able to open more open source type talks. We started to have a little bit more UX UI talks and human skills talks as well. So it was fun. It was fun to watch that evolution. That was before I worked at Microsoft. Well, I was at Microsoft. I was a community manager with their MVP award program, which is like a Veeam Vanguard or an influencer. So there, a lot of my job was actually helping find people to speak at the bigger events, doing like audits of people's contributions, finding opportunities to get our MVPs together, a lot of different things. It was a contract, and it was a really fun job for a while. So I really enjoyed
That's
it.
fascinating. Yeah, I mean, that's depth of experience. And I mean, and it's funny, Rick Vanover was there. Anyways, I
Yeah,
see you got the Kubernetes. I sometimes
yeah,
I
that's
draw
what we're
the
talking about.
topics. People have accused me, Geoff, you digress somewhere and then we can't find the path
No,
back.
that's all right. I'm keeping us somewhat on the rails. It's on the rails as ever.
The
And we are kind
future of
of talking about the
Kubernetes.
future.
This is what everyone's kind of sitting there and yeah.
I mean, I'd love to know, like, are there things that you or others in the community would like to see that KubeCampus or that more in general I
Yeah,
could
I
be
mean,
doing? What we could be
I would
doing?
say from my point of view, and it's a big ask, is some kind of testing which is closer to the real certification testing, because the Kubernetes certifications are well, I won't say notoriously, but they're known to be quite difficult, especially if people are used to multiple choice questions, because there's only one, the KCNA, which is multiple choice. And so I think that's maybe one aspect, getting used to or enforcing the idea that you have to become quick on the command line. Oh, I should patent that, quick on the command line, because they are timed exams, performance exams, which means you can theoretically know the material perfectly and fail the exam because you have too many typos and you keep so that's something I think would be the only thing, and it's only, in a way, it's kind of silly because a lot of people might not be interested in doing certifications. So it is a
Yeah.
kind of, I just think that it might help. Oh, is that your dog there? I did hear a woof woof. Oh, there he is. I see him. That's wonderful. I
Yeah,
saw your dog in the background.
that was Katie Corgi.
My cat can't come in because my cat's so loud. He's louder than me. But so that's the one thing. But apart from that, really, the fact that it keeps going into newer areas or and keeping up to date, I can't personally think. And from the people I've talked to, and I've talked to a lot of people about learning and KubeCampus and Cast Learning Site before, there was no, well, no, this would have been better or whatnot. They were pretty happy with it. So that's just my own little thing. And it might not be, that's maybe even a different type of course in a way. There are courses which are focused on certification only, and so they're avoiding kind of more of a general, which could be, so that's just my point of view. But swag is always nice too. Any extra swag can never go wrong there. Well, I think we've lost your microphone. One second, or maybe it's.
That was me muting. So.
Oh, good. I thought that was my speaker.
Hey, we were just talking about
speaker
Rick.
died.
Rick just joined. We were just talking about.
Oh, he's talking about. Well, no, someone told him. Rick, they're talking about you. It's like, oh my goodness. It was the
good stuff.
Dog Food Conference,
Sorry.
right? That's okay. Actually, Cassandra, you've just opened something that is fantastic. I never knew who invented that term, because I had managers saying, "No, Geoff, eat your own dog food," and I started thinking, something about me. They, why not drink your own beer? I mean, why this, or eat my own candy?
Yeah.
So it was Microsoft. Microsoft thought up that term.
Supposedly it comes from Purina, and I don't know if it's true or an urban legend, but the story is that a Purina exec basically was like, "Look, would you eat this dog food?" And that's like, for whatever reason, Microsoft ran with that term. But there were a few years early on in Dog Food Con, not before I was there. I guess they actually like gathered dog food. One year I did have Dog Food Con dogs trending because two of the other organizers had corgis, and so we were posting pictures. So it was a fun one to play with the branding too.
Now that's interesting. So, okay, what in the future, KubeCamp, is there any secrets? Anything you not allowed to tell us, but you'll tell us anyways? Or?
Not really a lot of secrets. I think just some of the stuff I've covered, like the specialized badges, some more interactive features among community members and with myself and others on the team. New content is coming, hopefully new partners, but swag and just kind of seeing where it all grows from here.
Well, that's good to know then, because swag is always very nice. I'm assuming too.
Oh.
Good.
And the other thing I'm excited about is eventually having virtual learning days. So when people can't, fly to Toronto or Amsterdam or wherever, we can do a virtual learning day. This is something I did when I was managing the open source community for a DevOps product. We would do kind of online group study learning type exercises, or we'd do like code jams and stuff too, but that sort of thing where we can actually have the instructors just come and present.
Yeah, because that problem with conferences is they tend to be expensive. So, I would have loved to go to Amsterdam, but yeah, no, that's really good to know. Okay, well, at 10:53, I don't know if anyone's got any other questions. We've gone over quite a bit. I'm trying to think, is there anything else we didn't cover? I'll say again that, for instance, Cassandra was fine. I was really sick for 5 days, so I thought that I'd be in this. It'd be the first time you'd hear a quiet Geoff. It's what happened to him? He got hit by a bus. No, I got the flu for the first time in 3 years. But yeah, I mean, I think what's important is I think the leitmotif, you would say, from film school. I actually did a cinema course in university, which I love. Career didn't turn out the way it was supposed to, but is that KubeCampus is active, it's evolving, it's not stagnant, and they're investing a lot of time and effort to it. So that's the place you want to be. We just talked about being laid off because projects lose money and interest. This is a project that's obviously got a big focus. Oh, the one thing I was going to also ask is, as Veeam gets more integrated with Kasten, I'm going to assume that there will be more lessons on that integration.
Oh yeah, yep.
Because that's a question I've had from the Veemies. I call them the Veemies. These are the people who have been doing Veeam for years. I'm going to be interested when I can see I can have a Veeam console, whatever. So
yeah, and that integration is, we're getting more and more integrated. Like the designers I was talking about, who are amazing. Some of them are more from the Veeam side of things, but yeah. So we work together really well, and like with Rick's team and events like this and stuff too. So this is again where I'm the kind of pivot point.
Yeah. So any questions out there before we go, just in case? I'm trying to keep one eye on the chat screen, which I finally figured out how to do.
And I will
Adam
say,
arrived. Adam, I think you got the time right. This is right at the end, but it'll be recorded.
Yeah. And I will say, if anybody, needs to get in touch with me, community manager at KubeCampus.com, as well as Cassandra.Ferris@Veeam.com, both go to me. And I'm at Cassandra Ferris pretty much on any social platform you can think of, but Twitter is still my go-to, even though it's, slowly declining in use. But
yeah, and I think
thank you for registering.
You also cover the hub too. You watch the Kubernetes Corner, and you watch the K10 channel as well. So if after this people kind of don't know where to go, certainly the Veeam Community Hub is one way you can reach out to Cassandra and other Kasten folks. Okay, any questions? Oh, we have someone who's registered for KubeCampus. Well, we got somebody to register from this show. That's wonderful.
Now let me know what you think of the labs when you take them, or give me feedback and advice.
Okay, folks, well, if there are no more questions, that'll be a wrap. Thank you very much, Cassandra, for coming. Hopefully we'll have you again in the future.
Yep.
And, you know, stay safe and try to, you know, all that traveling is gonna be difficult, especially this trip to Greece. So I don't know how you do it. Although it's not gonna be summer, you're right, but still.
No, it's
fascinating.
yeah.
But there are perks to becoming a community manager, folks. So if you're thinking career, recruiter, it's a fun job. It's in IT world, but with a human face, which is something I think is needed in this space.
The trade-off is you have days where you're up at 5 a.m. to set up the booth and up until 10 p.m. Like, it's very long days. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. The job, if I wasn't an extrovert, I don't know how I could do this job, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an introvert, so it's very hard for me. I have to have 50 cups of coffee, and then somehow I get the courage to know. But you're right. I mean, I did just eventually a code cloud thing, and a lot of developers were there. And I said, look, you know what? One thing you want to do is go in for the mirror before you go to a job interview and run through questions, answer them. And after a while, your subconscious mind gets used to you seeing yourself, doesn't freak out anymore. So that's one thing you do. Practice makes perfect. So go to KubeCampus and practice.
Yes.
Thank you very much, folks. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. I'll talk to you later. Bye.